slow enough on their own. Android Studio plus OBS is painful. But I reserve the right to come back and take you up on an OBS lesson, free OBS lesson another time. Okay, so it's lesson 3. So we've just done a bit of review about layouts, and we're going to carry on with layouts, and then we'll kind of introduce activities before the end of class today. Several people are having issues running the emulator. Here's one thing I had to do yesterday, because I was getting issues after a couple of the Android Studio updates ran. So under Tools and SDK Manager, I had to go into the SDK Tools, so this tab here. And my Android SDK build tools, notice it says it's installed. It was saying partially installed. If your Android SDK build tools says partially installed here, then if you select it and choose show package details, it was prompting me to install the latest version of the SDK tools, which is 2902. So that was unchecked and it was said not installed. I had to install that version, which is about 36 megs, and that made my emulator problems go away. So if you can't run the emulator, maybe give that a try. So again, Tools and SDK Manager, and then open the SDK Tools, which is the second tab, and you can try installing 2902. I can't remember whether that required an Android Studio restart. I don't think it did, but it might. So try that, see if you can run your emulator again. You may or may not need to do this. I found I had to. So this one here right at the bottom that I've highlighted. If your emulator's running fine, then you don't need to do this. You can if you want, but not necessary. But I was getting an error with my emulator, and it pointed me, after some mad Googling, it pointed me in this direction. Android Studio is a lot like Visual Studio. It's great, it's powerful, there's tons of features, but it's very easily broken. There's so many moving parts and so many updates all the time that what works today may not work tomorrow. So I'm going to show you, I want to build something kind of together today, go through an exercise. We haven't written a lot of Kotlin. We just did our very simple kind of mock login screen last week. So I'd like to do something that's a little more advanced. And then if we have time, I'll give you guys one to build on your own. If we don't have time in class, it's one you can build at home. So I'll show you what we're building, which is this lovely tip calculator here. So enter an amount, it will calculate and display the tip. And we're also using this control called the seek bar. It's like a progress bar. And as I change the value, it grabs the current value and recalculates things. So we'll go through this. We'll kind of build this from scratch together. So the UI, well, the UI is pretty clear. We'll need one edit text to be able to type in. I think we need 5 text views, because those text views are just displaying either static or dynamic content, but it's read-only. The user can't interact with it, right? I can't change these values. And then this control here of the seek bar. The other thing we'll add, which I didn't bother here, is we'll look at adding a theme, like a material design theme, okay, rather than getting the green with the hot pink progress bar. Can't say it's my favorite color combination. Google gives us a list of palettes. I'll show you where we can get those, and we can override at least the color theme on this. So I may leave this up so that we can reference it. So let's go ahead and create a new project. We'll use empty again, maybe later today, if not into next week. We'll actually look at some of the other activity types. For now, we'll just stick with the empty activity. I'll just call it lesson 3. You could call it tip calculator, call it anything you like. Make sure you pick Kotlin. And we can basically accept the defaults. Again, if you want to change the minimum API level, feel free. I'll just leave it at what it defaults to. So about 2/3 of Android devices should be able to run it. So on our layout, we'll need, here's what we'll need. We'll need 5 text view controls. We'll need 1 edit text so the user can type. And this should be numeric only. And there's an attribute we can set. We haven't looked at it yet, but you can find the attribute. And then we'll use 1 seek bar control. So I probably don't need to walk through designing the UI too much. I mean, I can keep it up here, and there's a screenshot of it on Blackboard. This one I did a while ago, slightly different alignment. It doesn't really matter where you align things. So here's our 1 edit text up top. Here's our 1 seek bar, and then our 5 text views, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the 3 that have numbers, those will change that we'll set the text property. These 2 that say tip and total, those are going to be static. So we can just use string values in the string resource to display those. The one other thing I'll do, I'll let you guys design the UI, but I'm just going to quickly reskin it a little bit. So there's a link on Blackboard inside of weekly learning and tools and resources that we can open up. So I'll just reskin it and get it launched. And then I'll give you guys some time to go ahead and design the UI, and you're free to ask for help in terms of using constraints and things. I'll maybe start, I'll put a couple elements on there to get started, and then you guys can do the rest. So in tools and resources, and you can use these, it's actually recommended you use these for your assignment as well. Okay. Google gives us both an icon set, which we'll get into a little bit later, but in here in this Android resources section, there's a link to materialpalette.com. So what Google wants, what they recommend is that we use one of their existing color palettes. So, I mean, you can pick color A and color B and color C, but they're somewhat fussy, somewhat following Apple's lead, not as fussy as Apple. Like Apple's, and Tom, you could speak to this, Tom's teaching Swift. we're sitting in on each other's classes to compare some notes. Like Apple wants all apps to have a very Apple-like feel. It's not really up to the designer. They put some real restrictions on designers' kind of visual creativity. They want all apps to have a certain consistency and look and feel. Google is encouraging, they're not quite as strict as Apple, but they're giving us design resources and they're saying, if you want to publish in the Play Store, we really want you to kind of follow our material design guidelines. So this site gives you palettes. So if I click on one of these palettes, pick any one you like. Sorry, hang on. I thought it would give me the full palette. Okay. I don't know why this palette link should be loading. Let's see. Okay. If you click two colors, it then gives you a palette with complementary colors. And notice it actually defines them with classes that we recognize in Android Studio. So Android Studio has things like a primary light, primary dark color, and an accent color. So if we open up if I go back to Android Studio for a minute, inside of, sorry, I'm in the wrong file. Inside of resources, values, and colors, this is the default, right? We've already got 3 keys defined for primary, dark, and accent. So I'm going to replace these color hex values with the primary, dark, and accent values from my palette. So if I click on this color, my browser automatically copies the hex value to my clipboard. So I'm going to replace the primary dark color in the color resource file. You don't have to use this palette. You don't have to do this at all, but I recommend you play around with it. So I'm going to replace the primary dark with that dark gray. And I get the little color swatch here so I can actually preview it here. My color primary, I'll grab from the palette. So that's this kind of medium gray. And then it wants an accent color, so this kind of brighter blue. It recommends as an accent. And it even previews it. Right? So the dark gray is at the very top. The primary color is that gray header that says palette preview. And then my accent color, that'll be used as the default on things like our floating action buttons or for underlining our edit text, etc. So I'll go ahead and grab my accent color as well. So now you kind of get a little mini preview of the palette. So by default, Android Studio defines these 3 colors. If we wanted to use the additional ones, well, we can add, we can add all these other things in here as well with these names. So it's kind of an easy way for us to theme our application, and we don't have to spend time trying to figure out what colors go together. The palette will do it for you. So I'll try and run my map now. It should just give us the hello world default text view on activity main. So in your assignment, part of what I want you to do is choose a palette, right? You don't have to come up with the color scheme yourself. Use the palette to help you. So you can think of our colors.xml. I mean, it's almost like using a CSS, although we also have a styles. So you notice our style generates a theme and it pulls the colors from colors. So we can define other styles in addition. If we want to include fonts and things like that, we can define them in this styles file. So notice we now get different colors. We've got this dark gray here. We won't see that accent color until we add on our edit text and our seek bar. So that seek bar, that slider, it will automatically use our accent color. So it'll be that bright blue in my theme. One other thing I want to change on here, if you look at my app in the emulator, my title is kind of lousy, right? Where does that title come from that you see in the header bar? On it? Yeah, it just takes the name of the project. If I want to rename that so it shows a friendlier name in the bar, where would I go to do that? Yeah, so inside of our manifest, right? It's going to automatically read it from the package name. All I actually had to do was highlight it with my cursor, and Android Studio converts that to a resource, creates a resource, a string resource. So where would I go now to actually give that resource a value? Yeah, so inside our values, I just go to strings.xml. So it generated the string resource. I can put in a friendlier name here. So now my header bar should change. So we should always be giving our app a friendly name. Package names for our projects generally aren't going to be too suitable in our UI. So later on, there'll be some other things we'll add in our manifest, but for today, probably this is sufficient. Anybody have questions, problems so far? Those of you who had problems getting your emulator to run, we still having problems, or are we good? Good? Okay. Did you have to update the SDK tool? No? What did you have to do to fix it? How did you fix it? Oh, it's okay. All right. Okay, well, let's start. I will start building. We can start building a few things in the UI. So I'm going to get rid of my hello world text view. And we can add a few things. Kind of refer back to. So the first thing we need is going to be our edit text. So let's grab one of those. So I think I don't know why the control is not called edit text. I always get confused whether the text view is static and the plain text is an input box or vice versa. I think plain text is the input box. Actually, we could use this. We might want this one instead. Let's actually add this one, a number decimal. It's still an edit text, but it's going to add validation to ensure that users can't type in, ABC here. Let's grab that one. Yeah, so it is an edit text. So we'll call this one edit text amount. I don't love this naming convention of the name of the control and then the descriptor on the end. That's typically how Android developers name their objects. So I'll follow the conventions, even though I'm not a big fan. But this is the most common naming convention. You're not bound by it. If you don't like it, I don't blame you. I don't like it either. But I'll show you what most developers will do. But I haven't seen that very much, what you're suggesting. I like it better. It's a good idea. If you like it better, by all means, I'm not going to stop you. Okay. What should we do with constraints for this one? What constraints do you think it needs? Okay, so I can either do it through here, or I can just, so if I anchor my right and left, it'll center it. So I know I've actually been using left to left of and right to right of. I'll maybe start using start to start of and end to end of, just because that's what Android Studio generates for us. So that I'll leave that. What about vertical constraints? Where should we put it? Okay, so let's constrain. Now, I can't actually draw it here. So maybe I'll do that one through the text view through here. So we'll say top to top of parent. We should probably also add some kind of like a placeholder text. What should this say? So there's some instruction to the user, like an HTML5 placeholder in an input text. Yeah, we'll use the hint attribute. So where should we put the hint, the text for that? We got two choices. We can hard code it in here, or what's our other? Yeah, we probably want to use a string resource. So I'll just call it amount. Why is that turned red? Right, because that resource doesn't exist. So the easy way to deal with this, highlight it, hit Alt Enter, and Android Studio gives us a prompt. Do you want to create a string value resource called amount? So I'll just click on that. It pops up this little dialog. So it's now created the key, and we just put in a value. So whatever we want the text of that hint to be. Now you could go manually. I could go manually to strings.xml and create it. Just a little bit of a shortcut to use Alt Enter and use our pop-up wizard. So now in strings.xml, we now get our XML key and value. All right, so there's our hint, shows in gray. I'll just run this quickly, and it's about time for us to take a pause. We'll just make sure this shows up where we want it to. Never seen that before. I have no idea what it means. We'll try again. All right. So when this happens, I'm going to try to, I'm going to do a rebuild on my project. All right, let's close the project. I'm not sure exactly what's going on. All right. Well, this will be an outstanding place for us to take a break. We'll come back in 10. I'll figure out what's going on, and I may need to go run to get some caffeine. Yesterday was a 16-hour day running on fumes.